What's going on YouTube? Cloverbells here back with another Scarlet and Violet video, and today we're going to be giving out our Regulation G restricted legendary tier list. So if you're wondering first of all why I'm wearing a hat in this video as well as a hat in the previous video, that is because it is like 20 degrees here in New York, so it is actually very cold. Even though I have the heater on blast, it is still quite chilly here, so you're gonna have to forgive my appearance for a bit, but hopefully you guys don't mind, and hopefully we can heat things up a little bit with some tier list discussions with our legendary restricted tiers. So before we even start putting things where they belong, I want to explain the tiers first, just so that you understand why we have these tiers the way we have them and why Pokemon are placed where they are when we start doing this. First of all, at the top we have the S tier. That's what we call the best of the best. These are like the best restricteds to use right now competitively. They have the best results all around, you know, just the best Pokemon to use. They're very usable on a lot of different teams. They have multiple build sets, very flexible in how you want to play them, and just overall, they don't really need that much help to work because they're just overall busted, okay? And hence the reason S tier. Your A tier, these are just a shade under the S tier. This is what we call the solid and consistent tier. They have some pretty good results overall. You'll see these, I would say, maybe about 70% of the time, you know, every 10 ranked ladder games or so. And they're very easy to build around with, just like your S tier. And for that reason, you know, these are also like very good options. So, you know, if you're trying to get into competitive right now, if you're trying to, you know, learn the restricted formats, it is my advice that you just use Pokemon within the S or the A tier because they don't need that much work to, you know, do well with. Okay, let's put it at that way. All right, then you have the B tier, and I've taken the B tier and I've actually split this up into the high B tier and also the low B tier. Okay, now these are restricteds that are still like very good overall, but they need a little bit more support than your A tier, which is okay, I guess, right? You can still win plenty of tournaments with these options, and you know, you know, if you had to have like a 300-person regional, you can see one or two of these, you know, within top cut, okay, you know, or top 32 at the very least. But like I said, you're gonna have to put a little bit of work to try and make them work. Which is okay, I guess, right? But because again, you know, in a restricted format, you're really building around your restricted, and the rest of your slots, you know, either support the restricted or they just help with matchups into the other restricted. That's what building is like in this format here. Okay, after that, then you have what we call the C tier. This is what we call the niche tier. You know, very subjective in terms of the restricted to use here. Like, yes, you can make them work, but one, you have to work really hard, and two, why use this when you can use some of the other Pokemon, you know, in the S and the A tier, right? But not saying they're bad, okay? But these are Pokemon that are just like, wow, why am I using this when I can just use this other restricted and, you know, just overall better, okay? Then we have the D tier. These are just like Pokemon that have like no use whatsoever. Like, at least with the C tier, there's at least one team composition where I guess it can work, but at least, but in the D tier, these are just like bad. You know, you're gonna have a very hard time, you know, making these work, and there's really no sense in wasting your energy doing that. So for that reason, we put it as the D tier. And then of course, down here where you have these 7 Pokemon, these are just the 7 pre-evolutions. You know, nobody's gonna be using these competitively, so you know, we just slap them on there just so that they don't take up space down here when we start sorting out the restricted. Okay, so now that we've explained the tiers, now let's go ahead and start ranking our restricteds. Okay, so first we have Koraidon here. So I think Koraidon belongs in the high B tier. And, you know, Koraidon, you know, versus Groudon, that's always going to generate discourse every time you have a restricted format like this in Scarlet and Violet. But we'll speak on Koraidon first. But what's really cool with him is that he enables a lot of the Paradox Pokemon. So imagine something like Flutter Mane and Raging Bolt here, right? And you know, the Koraidon brings out the sun, which is really important for both of these options because they can get the benefit and activate their photosynthesis ability, and then from there you can either get a speed boost or, you know, just modest nature doing a lot more damage. So Koraidon enables these partners, which is very good. And you know, a lot of Koraidon teams and a lot of Koraidon cores are going to start out like this, you know, with these two options, just because it's very easy to use, you know, with these special attackers, okay? And then at the same time, you know, you look at your speed, base 135, very good speed tier. This is one of your speed tiers in Regulation G, by the way, base 135s. It is a physical attacker, so you're definitely going to need something like a Clear Amulet on it. But a typical set here is, of course, the Collision Course, which is again a fighting move. And it's gonna be great into, for example, like Terapagos, right? That was the one matchup where Terapagos really struggled with and needed a support Pokemon to deal with Koraidon. And this is one of Koraidon's good matchups where it can deal with Terapagos, right? Then you have the Flame Charge ability, which is again important in getting the speed advantage, right? So this way you can outspeed other base 135s like another Miraidon or like another Chien-Pao, for example. And then even something like a Fluttermane you can outspeed technically too, right? There is some niche for U-turn, but I don't think you really need this. I understand the Weather War, you know, with something like Kyogre, but even then, I don't think it's like that worth it. But at the very least, you know, these two moves are going to be very, very solid with what you want out of it, okay? But like I said, enables partners really good, but it struggles a little bit against something like a Pelipper, right? Because like Pelipper has weather control and, you know, Hurricane, which Koraidon doesn't really want because, again, you have the fighting weakness here to flying, all right? And then at the same time, you know, you're looking at matchups like Calyrex, Ice Fighter, also not so great. You are forced to pretty much just go Terra Fire here most times, you know, just to try and resist the Glacial Lance. And then when you do that, you're just weak to the high horsepower that it has, you know, afterwards, right? So it can bait out your Terra and then hit you with the ground move later on. And these have, you know, fire Terras anyway, a lot of times, you know, if they're not grass or if they're not ice either. But those are the two matchups in particular that it can struggle with. And then Kyogre is always like kind of iffy too, just because, again, you know, it just changes weather on you. And then at the same time, it can deal some pretty big damage into you if it has the Ice Beam coverage. But also Water Spout also just hurts a ton, you know, if it already Terra Fire anyway. So, but that being said, you know, it's still okay. It can do quite a bit. And like I said, you know, something like this, and even partnered with Chien-Pao also looks pretty good. You can definitely generate some team compositions like this. I think Entei also works here to an extent, right? Just because, you know, you have a boosted Sacred Fire in the Sun, which does a lot of damage. We'll speak more about Entei Chien-Pao in like another video, but, you know, team compositions like this are quite good, you know, in terms of starting off with Koraidon here. So I'll definitely put it in the high B tier. You definitely need some speed control with stuff like Fluttermane and Raging Bolt there, and some good partners, you know, in those two, especially like a little bit more damage with Chien-Pao. But other than that, I think it's like a solid restricted if you want to play Regulation G. That being said, speaking of solid restricteds, all right, here we go. Miraidon in the S tier, really, really strong attacker, okay? And the same speed tier as Koraidon, but again, Miraidon, you know, has terrain control, which is important here. So like, even if you bring out Rillaboom and try and control the terrain against Miraidon, it still does so much damage, okay? Because of all the multipliers that you're getting, and then, you know, choice specs just makes it do even more. Terra Electric is also pretty cool, but again, you're seeing a little bit more Terra Fairy these days because of the Dazzling Gleam, which is really good into the mirror matchup because, again, you're not going to get nuked by another dragon move for something like Raging Bolt, right, which can definitely beat a Miraidon, for example. So this is where like Terra Fairy comes into really handy here. And then you get Volt Switch, deal a bunch of chip damage, you know, just in terms of pivoting out and changing terrain against Rillaboom stuff. And then, of course, Electro Jiff is just a super strong move here. And then we have seen some other moves like Discharge here, you know, where you can just do this next to a ground type, like a Blood Moon Ursaluna, or like a Terra Ground Chiyu over here. We've seen lots of different Miraidon compositions. Sometimes you'll either go like the Whimsicott route or you'll go the Grimmsnarl Screens route. I think both are very, very good. And then you can even have partners like that it can enable, like Iron Hands and even the Iron Bundle too. Like, don't forget about the Iron Bundle. It does very well on comps like this. This is actually a pretty solid 6 right now. Oh, by the way, I will say that. But that being said, again, very, very strong nuker. It has a lot of results already. Won quite a few regionals too. So, and of course, it came out on top at Worlds. No question why this can't be the S tier of the S tiers, right? After this, Terapagos, I think this is also a pretty good Pokemon here. I think it's a little bit better than Koraidon, but not quite the S tier that we had originally placed it before the format even began in Regulation G the first time around. But I think A tier is appropriate here. Terapagos does a lot of damage too, just like Miraidon. It's another special attacker. It can remove terrain, right, which is great, you know, once it does its own terrestrialization. Look at the stats, by the way. No, not this one. Terapagos, yeah, this one, the stellar one. Like, again, 130 special attack, 110 defenses, 110 special defense, decent speed tier. very bulky too. And again, the Starfall, you know, it's very strong, right? And then at the same time, you know, you just have to be aware of your weakness to Zamazenta in particular, right? And as well as the Koraidon matchup. These are the two restricteds that you really need to watch out for. This is why, you know, people started using Volcarona, right? Because again, the bug resistance and the fire typing is really good, you know, against the Koraidon and as well as the Zamazenta. You can kind of wall them out a little bit. And then you always have like Will-O-Wisp ideas where you can just simply burn them along with your Flame Body idea. And then this ended up being like a good support option, right? And then you just have to build in terms of like, you know, Protect the King, where you had like Incineroar, you had Rillaboom here, and then you had like some kind of redirector, something like a Clefairy, for example, where you're just trying and set up the Calm Mind idea, right? Where you had Terrastar from Earth, Power, Calm Mind, and then Protect, right? You know, originally, Terapagos also had the Choice Specs idea. That was really good for a while, but then over time, the leftovers Calm Mind started taking over. And I think this is still like the most prevalent idea today with Terapagos, right? And then you can just slap on something like here, like a Raging Bolt, and then Urshifu here, and then congratulations, you have made a Terapagos team, right? So I do think this is a good Pokemon to use. Again, it has great bulk and does a lot of damage, especially with Terrastellar. You have a lot of support options that can go well with it. But I do think A tier is correct with what we want out of Terapagos here. So let me just take off these things here. But again, just make sure you patch up your Zamazenta Koraidon matchup, because those are the ones that you have to prepare for if you want to use Terapagos. All right, normal typing pretty good against Calyrex Shadow. So that helps a lot too. Okay, and you get rid of weather, which is important, as well as terrain. So there's the idea behind that. All right, Mewtwo. I think this is just like a very worse Calyrex. Don't use this thing. I understand, you know, it's super cool. You're a Gen 1 fanatic, okay? Mewtwo look cool in the movies, and yes, it does get some coverage moves, which I guess is pretty good, right? But the problem is, like, what does this thing do that the Calyrex Shadow does not do? Yes, it has a little bit better bulk, but, you know, that's not enough, okay? So, you know, just use the Shadow Rider. Yes, again, like I understand it gets stuff like this: Flamethrower, Ice Beam, Thunderbolt. Okay, you can do the Expanding Force stuff, but you know, it's not necessary. I don't think I need Mewtwo for that. I'd rather just use the Shadow Rider or even Terapagos. Like if I wanted a special attacking restricted, I'm using Terapagos and I'm using Miraidon or even the Shadow Rider, for example. Don't use the Mewtwo here. Lugia, I think it's better than Mewtwo. I do think it does. You can get a niche result out of it. Like we did see this, you know, in a couple of regionals and even in Worlds. Like I understand what people want to do with this thing. Like yes, you can do the leftovers. You can do Calm Mind and Aeroblast and Earth Power. But again, at this point, you know, why not just use and then Multiscale, right? Now why not just use Terapagos? Like it's the same thing, right? And then Terapagos just more damage. Look at this base 90 special attack, not great. I understand the whole idea with Lugia is the bulk, and then you can just capitalize off of that with something like Incin, you know, where you have physical attack damage reduction, and then you have special defense boost with Calm Mind, and then again you can boost your special attack a little bit more. But the problem is one Calm Mind is not enough, and you might even need like 3. So, you know, it's just so much work to get this going, where I don't need as much work if I wanted to use something like Calm Mind Shadow Rider or even Calm Mind Terapagos, right, for example, right? And even to an extent, like I'd rather use Calm Mind Kyogre, right? I think any of these are just better Calm Mind users than Lugia. But if you really wanted to, yes, you can make it work. But like I said, you're working too hard than you really need to, okay? But at least it has a niche, right? So C tier, yes, it gets nuked by Ice Rider, it gets nuked by Shadow Rider. Not great when you're weak to that, and then you get nuked by Miraidon too. So you actually have a weakness to like 3 of the S tier mons. Okay, that's not good. And I guess you have a decent matchup into Koraidon. Okay, sure, great. That's not enough. No, by no means. Okay. So I think we're gonna just leave that in the C tier. I really want to put in the D tier, but I think it's a little bit better than Mewtwo. All right, Ho-Oh is like one of those restricteds where like it's probably better in a dual restricted format where it can support your other main restricted. So I can definitely see Ho-Oh being like very good next to something like a Groudon or at least a Koraidon for that matter. But the fact of the matter is, it's not a dual restricted format. It's a single restricted format. And yes, I understand you get Sacred Fire, but you know who else gets Sacred Fire that you don't need to commit a restricted slot to? Entei. Okay, so if anything, just use Entei, and you know you're faster, right? Entei has 10 more base speed than Ho-Oh, and you know, even though it has 15 less attack, at least I don't have to commit my restricted slot to it, which is always pretty good. And you know, you can still, I guess, make it work by doing stuff like this, where you have, and we did this in the past too. You can do stuff like Chien-Pao and then put Urshifu over here, and then just do like coaching stuff, right? With the Urshifu here, by Urshifu I mean the water one. So you can do that, I guess, but you know, that's okay. You know, that's not better than some of the other stuff you can do. But if I had to do coaching Urshifu with a restricted Pokemon, I would do it with like Calyrex Ice Rider, for example. But you know, something like this can work, and we have made this work before. So you know, if you really wanted to use Ho, just start with these three, okay? But other than that, I still think you have to work hard for what you want. You know, if you really wanted to just make Ho work, I don't think it's that amazing. For that reason, I think we're gonna. Is that better? It's better than Mewtwo. I don't know if I really want to put this in a niche tier just yet. I think it's D tier. Like, do I want to put it here? Sure, I guess, maybe. All right, we'll leave it here in the C tier for now. But you know, it really is the D tier. But we'll see if we can justify it a little bit more later on as the video goes on. Koraidon, Kyogre Groudon here. So I think Kyogre is pretty okay. You know, I think it's like on the same level as Koraidon per se. I think it's like high B tier. It has had some pretty solid results overall. Not as good as some of the A tier or S tier Pokemon, but again, Kyogre's like okay. Okay, I'm not gonna hate it. Like, you can definitely do a couple cool sets with it. You know, besides Mystic Water. All right, that's already like one idea that you can do with it. Obviously, you can definitely make it work with Tornadus. This is always like a starting point with this. And then from here, you can just do like, you know, AV Kyogre, right? Make it super bulky, take a lot of damage, not necessarily a lot of speed. You can do Calm Mind Kyogre, you know, with leftovers, like we mentioned a little bit earlier. So you can definitely do something like this. Assault Vest, Mystic Water. You can definitely make all of these Kyogres work. So like lots of different ways to try and make the Ogre work. Which is good. You just have to be aware of Raging Bolt and Rillaboom, and for that, this is why you see a lot of Serena with it. So like Kyogre, Tornadus, Serena is always going to be like a solid starting point here, just to be able to deny priority thanks to Queenly Majesty, right? And this is what I mean, like you need support from Serena and you need support from Tornadus. So already I have to dedicate 2 slots to try and support and make the Kyogre work. But that's okay. You know, that's what, you know, regulationG restricted formats are about. You have to support your restricted, you know, and help it out against some of the other restricteds, and this is what you have to do. Okay, now you have 3 other slots for, you know, either making your Kyogre more stronger or, you know, partner, you know, having stuff against other restricteds. I also think Landorus Incarnate comes here again, just like a good solid ground type option, especially with like a Choice Scarf idea. Great into Miraidon, right? Kyogre also struggles against Miraidon. So the Landorus Choice Scarf also does well into that. So, you know, this is always going to be like a good starting point with these 4, right? And if I had to do a Kyogre team building video, this is probably where I would start next, okay? But anyway, so Kyogre looks good here. Does okay into like the Ice Rider matchup a little bit, right? You can pressure it that way. Does pretty good into Koraidon too. But again, like I said, does need a little bit of support. Does pretty good into Groudon too, you know, which we're going to talk about in a second. Some Shadow Rider matchups is also okay. If you just have a good solid Dark type with your Kyogre, I think it's okay. This is where like Wo-Chien was really good, I guess, with Snarl support. That being said, I think high B tier is correct. It's a little bit inconsistent sometimes. You know, once you've taken damage, you can't do as much damage anymore. You have to rely on like inaccurate Origin Pulse. Whereas like Ice Rider and Calyrex Shadow Rider, they don't have this problem, right? Where they're limited by their HP just in terms of what they have. So I think for that reason, this is why Kyogre is a little bit shade under. Like you can technically justify it being in the low A tier, but for now, I think high B tier is going to be correct. After this, we have Groudon here. So I'm actually more of a Groudon supporter now than I was in the beginning of regulationG, solely because of there's so much more Miraidon right now. that I think ground typing is going to be important. And the fact that Groudon does very well into Miraidon is a big difference maker. And I think this time around, Groudon can definitely see a little bit more exploration and see more play. But whereas the first time, I don't think there was enough time to explore Groudon because, you know, World Championships were on the horizon. But now that we have this flexibility where there is no World Championships at the end of this format, I think more people are going to be experimenting with Groudon this time around and get more uses out of it. And for that reason, they'll find out it does pretty okay into Miraidon. Actually, does great into Miraidon. But it does need a little bit of support to work. But for that reason, I do think low B tier is correct. Okay, I don't want to put it in niche tier, and I don't want to put it in high B tier just yet. It may end up working its way into the high B tier, right? But I think low B tier is correct. Again, you do have to rely on inaccurate Precipice Blades, which is not great. And the Ice Rider matchup is a problem. Same with the Kyogre matchup. So you need a Wide Guard user, and you need something to pressure the Kyogre, which is why I think Raging Bolt is definitely going to come here, right? With most Groudon teams, of course. And same thing with Fluttermane. It's almost like the Koraidon team, right? Where these two are just going to be very, very important into those ideas. And, you know, I think Chien-Pao also makes sense here to an extent. You know, again, just having ice coverage into Miraidon is also like really good. And also into the Shadow Rider matchup where you can just Sucker Punch it and just KO it and force it to Terra. I do think Steel type coverage is also good with Groudon. I do remember Bronzong being good because, again, you know, if you pressure the Miraidon, they're going to go Terra Fairy, right? But then you need something to really hit it with, and you need a Steel move. And I think Bronzong can do that for you, you know, with something like Gyro Ball here. So I do think Bronzong Groudon teams, you know, may come back a little bit, but we'll have to wait and see what happens. But I think something like this is a decent starting point, okay? But we'll see what happens a little bit more with Groudon here. And don't forget, you still get fire coverage just like Koraidon. So, yeah. After that, we've got Rayquaza here. So, you know, the thing with Rayquaza, you know, of course you get weather control over, you know, stuff like Kyogre and Groudon and Koraidon. But, like, that's still, like, relatively niche because those aren't even, like, S-tier restricted. Now, I understand the idea, like, you can have, like, Chien-Pao Entei stuff where, you know, this is going for, like, the Choice Band extreme speed idea and Terra Normal. And at least with Terra Normal, it gives you immunity against Astral Barrage from the Calyrex Shadow Rider. But other than that, you know, it's just an E-speed bot. I'd rather just use Dragonite / Entei if I really wanted to just spam E-speed with Terra Normal, right? And at least with Dragonite, you have Inner Focus, so you can't get intimidated, whereas where this thing can. So, yeah, that's the drawback with Rayquaza. I don't think it's, like, terrible, like, in the D tier, but I think we're just working hard to try and make it work. But at least this is, like, a decent starting point here. But I don't think it's, like, completely worth using Rayquaza. I do think it's better than Mewtwo at least. So I think putting it in the C tier is exactly where we need it. Now, that being said, again, you can do, like, some Swords Dance stuff. So you can do that. Does it get Tailwind? It does get Tailwind. Okay, so maybe you can find some niche with a Tailwind restricted, you know, in using Rayquaza. But, again, I don't think it's, like, amazing. But at least you get to spam these moves, right? Dragon Ascent. Okay, we actually did feature Rayquaza on the channel before, like, from the regionals. So I think it's okay to try and use it. It's fun. Okay, but I just don't think it's, like, within the S or the A tier. That being said, all right, now we're getting into, like, some of these guys down here. So I think both Dialga forms are not super amazing. Again, you know, if I really wanted a special attacking restricted that was bulky, again, I'm just going back to Terapagos and I'm going back to Miraidon. Yes, you can do, like, Trick Room stuff with this. So I guess with this Dialga, if you really wanted to make it work, this is all you do. You just use this Dialga Origin, and again, the real problem is that you can't use an item with it. Like, you're forced to use the Adamant Crystal, but at least with Telepathy, you can do stuff like this with Ursaluna, right? And this is, like, the only real niche that you have to do with it, like this and this, okay? And then you can do Pelipper ideas, you know, just to control weather. And then this last slot, I don't even know what you would do. Maybe you just slap on Urshifu and call it a day, right? If I had to build a Dialga Origin team, I would just do this, right? Where you have, like, some synergy here with Earthquake. So you can do that at the very least. So if that's worth it, okay, sure. But Yeah, I still say we're going down here. Same thing with this one. Okay. Yes, you get Chirkum here. But again, I don't think I don't think it's necessary. Same thing with these guys. You know, they don't really give me anything that I need. Like this guy, this is not Dynamax anymore. Like again, if I look at Palkia, it's just all inaccurate moves. Like I have to rely on like Hydro Pump, Spatial Ren. You know, all these moves can miss, right? So like it's not worth it, right? So look at this: Spatial Ren, Hydro Pump, okay, Hydro Pump, right? Earth Power, and then Protect, okay, and then you can maybe slap on a Life Orb over here. Like I understand this, but at the end of the day, I don't need it, okay. But you can make it work. But I still think like it's just not as good as some of the others, okay. Same thing, same problem here with this Giratina. Like you're forced to use that item and you don't really get to run an item. Again, all of these just have a problem against like Calyrex Ice Rider, okay. They just get blasted, you know, with the Glacial Lance, and even though this is not like a super effective hit onto it, it's still like strong enough where it's gonna do like a lot of damage, right? So I think we just go down here. Same thing with Reshiram. Like again, Reshiram is one of those Pokemon where like again it could be okay in another format, a dual restricted format, but what is this thing supposed to do like that maybe Koraidon or Groudon can't really give me? Like I guess we have some immunity. Yeah, I guess it's super bulky like with an Assault Vest, right? Where you can go for something like Dark Pull. No, does it get Snarl at least? It did get a Dark move. I remember. Not Crunch. Let me see like Dark moves here. Or like, oh no, it got Shadow Ball, right? I think it got, yeah, it does get Shadow Ball. Yeah, but so it's like okay until like the Shadow Rider matchup. I don't even know why I'm wasting time talking about Reshiram here. Let's put it in the don't use tier. Okay, now Zekrom on the other hand. Okay, so I'm gonna put it in the niche tier. Okay, and I'll tell you why I put it in the niche tier. Okay, so in reality, just use Miraidon, okay? This is like the better Electric Dragon, and if you really wanted to, you don't have to commit a restricted slot. If you really wanted to use Electric Dragon typing, you can just use Raging Bolt, of course. But at least Zekrom has somewhat of a matchup, okay, into some different stuff. Like at least you can beat Kyogre. It's not bad into the Koraidon idea, because again, this also gets Dual Wing Beat, right? Okay, it does get Dual Wing Beat. It gets, you know, Electro Shot, not Electro Bolt. What's that signature? Bolt Strike, but that's inaccurate. It does get Tailwind somehow. It does get Tailwind. Does it get Dragon Dance? It does get D-Dance. All right, so I guess there's some niche to it, but you know, you need like the clear. I mean, otherwise Instant just Intimidate cycles this for days. That being said, it's not terrible, okay, but I don't think it's amazing. I think C tier is just where we need it there. I don't know what else you really want to do with Zekrom here. This one, same thing. Kyurem Black, don't use this. All right, the white Kyurem on the other hand, I think can definitely work on some teams. Like we used this before in the past a little bit. So like Kyurem White again doesn't get Intimidate cycled, but base 170 attack is really good. Now you can try and do stuff like this with Ninetales, and this is what we did earlier, where like you have ideas here where you can just like spam some really strong blizzards, okay, you know, with the Ninetales here, right? Just because you have the snow ideas, and then you're getting a defense boost, right? And Zacian is not that strong in this format, not that prevalent either. So because of that, Kyurem White can be pretty good here, especially when you can support this thing with like Aurora Veil. So I think that also like kind of makes sense here. And you have Freeze Dry, which is great into both Koraidon and Kyogre for that matter. And then you get a fire move here. What's that called? Was it Fusion Flare? Yeah, it's called Fusion Flare, right? And then just Protect. So now you have your Ice Rider matchup, which is also okay, right? So it's not terrible. So it can work on these Ninetales teams. I think it's okay. But, you know, niche tier at best, right? So Galeo, this is not Dynamax format where you can go for Max Steel Spike or Max Quake to boost it up. And it's not Weakness Policy time where you can bulldoze this thing or like Sucker Punch yourself. So Galeo was really good in Dynamax, but unfortunately this is not Dynamax, so we have to put it there. The Clover favorite, Lunala. We love stuff like this. We're like, yes, this could be A, but in reality it's just like a B tier. So, but you know, we like making Lunala work here. We've had some pretty good teams in the past with Lunala. I do think it's I don't think it's as high as like the Kyogre, Koraidon stuff. I think Lunala is down here with Groudon here. Now, if you wanted a good Lunala team, look at the graphic that we have on the stream. All right, that should give you an idea of what we've got planned later on in the in the videos. But you can do a couple things with Lunala, right? But the thing is, Lunala wants to do too many things in a single restricted format. It's just way better in a dual restricted format. I think it's like super good in two restricteds because then you can really define its role. Whereas like Lunala wants to like deal damage and support your team, and that's too much to ask for this. Shadow Shield is a very good ability. Like I said, you do get Trick Room ideas here, okay? And then you have the Meteor Beam power-up set. So you have that. Moongeist Beam is also very strong. And, you know, from here you can do something like Terra Fairy Moonblast. I think that's okay if you really want to do stuff like that. You also have the Calm Mind idea with leftovers. So you can also explore that route, right? If you really wanted to do this, I think it works relatively well. And then you can also do stuff like this with Indeedee female and also the Tornadus, okay, where you can start spamming Expanding Force, right, and really do some damage, right? So I think this also works too if you really wanted to. And don't forget, Lunala also gets Wide Guard, which is great in a format like this where everything is clicking spread moves. But you know, you have to commit like one of these slots to it, and you know, I'd rather just use Lunala as a support restricted and deal more damage with like another restricted, right? So, but again, it's still like, okay, you can get like a couple of results with it, and it has gotten a few results, you know, in the previous Regulation G format. So I still think it's in the low B tier. I think you have to work a little bit hard to make it work, but it's fun. When it works, it's fun, okay? Because it's like a restricted that not too many people use. And we like that on the channel, right? So, you know, for that reason, I think the B tier is correct with the Lunala here. All right, this is just as bad as the other Solgaleo. In fact, worse, because you, at least with the regular Solgaleo, you can't intimidate, but this one you can. Yeah, and then this one, okay, so there's always like an argument with like Dawn Wings versus Lunala. Let me explain to you the difference here, okay? First of all, Dawn Wings, yes, better special attacker, for sure. Look at the bulk. Better defense, yes, and better special defense, right? And it's slower, so in theory, it is a better Trick Room user, okay? The HP is not that great, but again, that you know, it's still like bulky. But here's the thing. Shadow Shield is way better than Prism Armor, okay? That's the first separation. And this thing does not get Wide Guard, whereas this one does. And that's a huge difference. Those two things are a big difference why Lunala is better. That being said, we have seen some stuff with like the Indeedee Torkoal stuff. Not this one, the other one. So you can just do stuff like this, where you have Indeedee Torkoal, and then you have like the other Ursaluna. So, and then you have like the Hisui and Lilligant for that matter. We have seen this. So if you want to play stuff like this with Indeedee Hatterene, right? Torkoal stuff. So like this can work, but this is like the only team comp so far that has really worked, that has gotten results so far. So yes, there may be other things in theory, but like, man, you would have to really work at it. But again, those two differences to me, of course, make it so that this is not as good as the other Lunala. I do think it's better than some of these guys. So I do think I want to put it like this, just in terms of like ordering, right? Maybe even something like this. Yeah, I think this is like okay. All right, yeah, we'll just leave it like that. I won't even bother with this order technically. I do think it's better than some of these others though. All right, Zacian. Yes, I do think it's in the B, but is it high B or is it low B? I think it belongs right here. I think it's better than Koraidon, but not as good as Kyogre, right? Now, again, the whole thing with Zacian, if you missed out or if you never played in this format, the difference with Zacian here and Sword and Shield is a lot, okay? First of all, the attack is lower, 150 versus 170, right? And Intrepid Sword only works once, whereas in Sword and Shield, if you got intimidated, you could just switch it out and reset the buff and get the attack boost back. You can't do that anymore. So once you lose it, that's it. It's over. Once you switch it out, you don't get this back. So that's like a huge nerf to it. But that being said, great speed tier. Okay, Behemoth Blade still does a lot of damage. And Play Rough is really good against the Dragon Restricteds. Very strong into Calyrex Ice Rider, of course. Play Rough great into Miraidon for that reason. It's also great into Koraidon too. And then you can do Substitute to try and help you get around the Intimidate stuff and help stall out Trick Room stuff. But yeah, overall, like this has worked before. Like you can just do this Tornadus with Regidrago, okay, and then run something like either Indeedee or Furgraph. And I think this is already like a good starting point. This is what has been proven already in the previous Regulation G format. Like if you want to just use something like this, I think it works. You can also use ideas like Chenpao with the Zacian, and this can kind of help you compensate for your loss of base stat in the attack, and also, you know, you don't get Intrepid Sword anymore. So like Chenpao can help you with that, right? Otherwise that would be busted. Like you got your attack back, and you get Intrepid Sword back, and you get the Chenpao edition, and then you kind of understand, okay, yeah, this is why I got nerfed. But you know, those ideas can still work with Zacian. It has had a couple of results, even in Worlds too, right? So we'll see what people do more with Zacian now that there's no Worlds format with it, but we'll see. I do think Zamazenta is in the A tier. I think it's the better dog now in not even now, like it was better in Regulation G overall. It has a great matchup into Terapagos, first of all. And then Body Press, the thing that made Zamazenta over the top, right, was the fact that this generation, it got Body Press. Okay, that was the thing that fans have been asking for in Sword and Shield. They got it in Regulation G. Okay, Body Press, Zamazenta, so much damage. Okay, then you add stuff like this, you know, with Chenpao, and then you add Entei, and then you add Rillaboom. Okay, then you even add something like Urshifu that can also do coaching. Okay, give yourself a defense and an attack boost, which you definitely want, you know, with Body Press stuff. And then Heavy Slam just nukes Flutter Mains and other Terra Fairy options here. You also get Wide Guard if you really want to take advantage of that. Zamazenta, really good. Okay, again, with this defense boost, along with the Body Press idea. And then you can also just do Iron Defense stuff if you really want to as well. So to each their own. But, you know, just Chenpao and Entei stuff with Zamazenta, very, very good. I think I think A tier is correct here. Where we want. Definitely better than some of these other guys down here. All right. I think the Eternatus also within the C tier. Now, there's two types of sets that you can do with it. And depending on you as a player, you'll choose one over the other. Let's just set up the Eternatus sets. Okay, I think you can do Power Herb Meteor Beam stuff right here. And then just do like Dynamax Cannon and just start nuking. Okay, you also have Sludge Bomb, which is great into the Terra Fairy options. So you can do stuff like this, and then just, you know, also use Pressure. But then you can also do the other way and just do like Cosmic Power Recover stuff. This is the more annoying set. And then just Pressure Stall out the opponent. And then you just have like Leftovers Recovery, you know, with Protect. And then something like Toxic or whatnot. You know, just this gets annoying over time, right? So this is the stall variant, right? This is the damage variant. This is the stall variant. Okay, so you can also make Life Orb work on this if you really wanted to, if you didn't want the power up stuff. But again, the cosmic power stuff is just the more annoying idea. But that being said, I think C tier is correct where we want it. Now we're down to the horses, and I think they're both in the S tier, like without a doubt. Like, I understand there was no top 8 results from Worlds from the Calyrex Shadow Rider. It still had very strong results. It still had very good regional wins and still had very good regional results. And it forces you to respect it. Like, anytime you do team building in Regulation G, one of the first questions people are going to ask you is, where is your Shadow Rider matchup? It is that oppressive, okay? And, you know, it forces you to learn everything about it. You have to know the speed tier, where like 224 is going to outspeed it, right? And you need one to look at this. You need 112, you know, with Under Tailwind to outspeed it, right? That's important. Okay, it forces you to learn more. Like, you can do Astro Barrage. Of course, Astro Barrage is the signature move. Calm Mind, Leftovers set, you can definitely do as well. Okay, you can do Psychic or Psychic Noise. Either way, like some Psychic Nuke along with Protect. And usually these things run something like this, where you're just trying to protect it, where you have like Incineroar and Rillaboom. double fake out ideas. And then you have Urshifu here, some of the best mods here. Then you have Clefairy here. Again, just, to help you even with the friend guard setup, double fake out redirection to set up the Calm Mind. And then you just have After You, to help you out in the Trick Room matchup, because Clefairy is much slower than the Calyrex Ice Rider. And then here you could do something like Flutter Mane or Raging Bull for a little bit more speed control, but you could definitely do stuff like this. I have seen the Specs variant. I've seen Life Orb ideas here. You could do Life Orb, Calm Mind, or even Nasty Plot, right? Like Nasty Plot Calyrex is so strong, and then even Spell Tag if you don't want the Life Orb chip, also very, very strong. And it just forces you to have a Dark type in your team building, right? Or Terra Normal, something like, for that reason, right? This is the reason why Terra Normal was a thing, because you can't take this Astro Barrage. It's just too much damage. But of course, S tier is correct. And then after that, the Ice Rider, again, very strong, very oppressive too. The only difference here with the Ice Rider is that you need to set up the Trick Room, right? And for that reason, you need not necessarily need, but you need a backbone to try and help it set up. Clear Amulet saved this thing, because Intimidate cycling would have been devastating like it was in Sword and Shield Dynamax era. But I think just fake out pressure, with the Amoonguss redirection support, with Rage Powder is going to be good, has been good overall. And then just other options like Urshifu here, just rounds out your Fire, Water, Grass core. And then from here, you could do like whatever you want technically. And just setting up Trick Room, clicking Glacial Lance, super strong, and things that resist the ice, like Steel and Fire types. This is where your high horsepower comes into play. Now, that being said, I think people are going to get a little bit more creative later on. They'll go like Assault Vest variants and get the Trick Room elsewhere. Like maybe you could do like Instant Amoonguss P2 stuff. Like we have seen this idea before in Sword and Shield. We've seen Torkoal stuff where you're clicking, Eruption and Glacial Lance in Trick Room. I think high horsepower and something like Close Combat, right, will be good. So we'll have to wait and see. But I even think Seed Bomb can be a thing against something like Kyogre, like it was in Sword and Shield. But who knows? But I think Assault Vest will get explored. Like imagine this: like you have Assault Vest Calyrex, right? And then you add Urshifu with coaching. Okay, we've seen this already in Regulation H, where you had the coaching idea with an Assault Vest user. So you already have Spadef, right, with the Assault Vest. Then you add the defense boost with coaching. How do you remove the Calyrex? Okay, and then you add Amoonguss here that can heal it. So like the Calyrex just becomes super hard to remove when you have all the support. So I think you'll definitely see this in the early get-go, and for good reason. But we'll see. Maybe people won't buy into the Assault Vest set yet. But with this, you have a lot of flexibility. You can survive Miraidon stuff now. You can survive Calyrex Shadow Rider stuff a lot more easier. Okay, and you have more bulk available to you. So we'll see what happens. But don't overlook the Assault Vest set. I think it's way better than the Swords Dance stuff, or even something like Life Orb. It's either just Clear Amulet ideas. But we'll see. We'll see what people decide to do. But I think S tier is correct. Super strong, super oppressive, super bulky, and all it takes is one KO for this thing to steamroll, right? But that's our list. So let's look at this. We have Miraidon, Calyrex, both Calyrex in the S tier, Terapagos, Zamazenta here in the A tier, high B tier, Ogre, Zacian, and Koraidon. Low B tier, Lunala and Groudon here, and then some of your C tier guys are down here, with Lugia stuff. I think a lot of these just go here in the don't use tier, but I'm a little bit optimistic and nice a little bit, because there is some niche for these guys, but you're just working very hard. Okay, and then obviously these guys, they just don't do anything for you, right? So yeah, that's our tier list. So let me know what you think of our starting regulation restricted tier list here. Eventually we'll put out another tier list that has like all the other Pokemon, which we've done before on the channel. So feel free to look back on that one. But we're going to update that one as well at some point as we get closer to January, even though there's only like a week and a half left. So, that list will come out shortly. But if you're trying to do team building and if you need a little bit of help, constructing squads. If you're trying to go to a local or you need help with a regional coming up in January, make sure you sign up for coaching on the channel. If you look in the video description below, as well as in the pinned comment section, there is a link to join the channel with the tier 3 sub. And then from there, you get a one-on-one Discord call with me where we can build a team from scratch and we can help you earn CP at your next local/regional. We've done that already the last couple of years, and we're going to keep it going, for a while now. Okay, so reach out, sign up, and then once you do, join the Discord. Technically, you join right now, that's free. But once you do, just message me, and then we'll coordinate the time to meet and get you what you need. All right, but that's it for now, folks. We'll be back with another video in the next one. Peace out, and have a good one.